I was thinking the opposite. It's a teaching moment for him. That dad is
All right, I'd like to welcome you guys to the Masters of Toy Design panel. We're going to go ahead and get things started. I am your moderator, Pixel Dan, and we've got a great cast here with us today to talk about the world of Masters of the Universe toy design. The gentlemen up here on the stage, I'm sure you recognize them all at this point, but they have worked on various aspects of Masters of the Universe dating all the way back to the vintage line here. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to kind of do this as sort of like a Q&A type panel. So if you guys have specific questions that you want to ask anybody up here relating to the design of the toy product, I think that's what we're going to go ahead and do. So before we go ahead and start into that, why don't we go ahead and go down the line. You guys can introduce yourselves and kind of give a little brief description of what you've done for the product. We'll go ahead and start right here with Martin.
I've done absolutely nothing. No, my name is Martin Arriola. I was at Mattel for 32 years, recently retired, and started at Mattel in '82, and first worked on Hot Wheels, then eventually segmented into He-Man and Secret Wars and a whole bunch of other things, too much to list. But had the pleasure to work with these guys.
Yes, we did.
All right, guys, come on.
Jim Preziosi for Horsemen. We started in 1999. That was our entry into our own business, was having a meeting down at Mattel early, I guess it was early June, right around this time, in 1999, we met Martin and several other people from Mattel, and that's where we started, and that's how we got started with the master stuff. And hang on a second.
Come on, Eric. What's up, Eric?
Hi, I'm Eric Treadaway. I'm a sculptor and designer for Horsemen, and obviously late.
Typical.
And I did this at San Diego Comic-Con. I don't know how many of you guys were there. We're going to do it again here because I want all Masters fans to be in on this, all right? You guys are included. Hang on a second. This is my introduction. Stop texting me. Hey, this is Corn Boy. Here at PowerCon, here with a few hundred of my closest friends. Let's hear it!
Facebook!
Let's go right up on Facebook.
I told you.
I'm Corn Boy.
Hi, I'm Joji Djokovic, and I'm a sculptor and a graphic designer, and I've been lucky enough to be working with these guys for a number of years, so hi.
So yeah, like I said, I think we're going to go ahead and do this Q&A style, if that's okay with all of you gentlemen up here. I think that's kind of what we decided we were going to do. So we've got a microphone sitting right here in the center aisle. If any of you guys have any questions relating to the creation of these toys, the design, the sculpt work, that's exactly the kind of stuff that these guys up here would be perfect to talk about.
Yes.
I would like to ask that we keep all of the questions limited to the actual toy design process, and let's not ask questions that would be directed more towards Mattel about the line itself. That could be reserved for the Mattel panel later on. Cool? All about toy design in this panel. I think that'd be great.
Just to start to that note, and I spoke to you about it. When I first met these guys, I was already actually off of the action figure line. I was doing Mattel Sports, but when I heard you guys were in the house, I had to check them out. And you guys were still doing stuff for McFarlane, right?
Yeah.
And they brought in all these awesome figures. I was like, wow. And then you guys are doing a four up, right? Two up.
12
Just these fabulous sculpts. And
Yeah, 2-ups are like when you sculpted it twice the size that it's going to be when it's finished product. And we used to do that in order to fit a lot of extra detail in. You don't really have to do that with a lot of the computerized.
And so what happened was, back in the day when I first started, we had our own internal sculpting department. And some of them were prima donnas. And it was a little hard to work with them because I would do a B sheet or rendering, and this is the way I want it to look like, and then they would go off. I remember the dinosaurs was a perfect example that this guy, Hal, his first name, I can't remember first name was Hal, I can't remember his last name. Oh. And he bought me beautiful clay sculptures. Awesome. And then it went to the internal sculpt department, and they just totally butchered them. I was like, oh my God, look at Piggy Bank now. What happened to that? Looks like Piggy Bank. But you couldn't fight back because there were internal sculpts. But the internal sculpting department, but little by little, it changed. And it was a little pendulum shift, and then we were able to start hiring guys like these guys. And it was more, we got the more vendor relationship, and I would be able to say, look, this is, when if I wanted to tweak it, you guys would listen because I was paying you. Right? I was like, I want it like that. But these guys needed no tweaking because they're so awesome. So I just wanted to bring that up, right straight up, because in my time when I was there, how it shifted from having to use internal sculpts, which are sometimes great. Tony Guerrero was awesome. He's the guy that sculpted the original He-Man, Tony Guerrero. Awesome sculptor. But I didn't always get Tony Guerrero. I got this other guy, and this other guy. And then it's like, wow, man, this is rough. And then little by little it shifted so then we can get guys like this. So, anything to say?
Well, we were floored when we first made the pitch to Mattel, we want to come and talk to you guys about the possibility of coming and doing design work. We thought we were going to be just laughed at and just no. But we knew a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy. We're from Jersey, so that kind of stuff happens. We know a guy, we'll know a guy, we'll know a guy. And we kind of got a little bit of a connection, an indoor, a foot in the door, and we went there and had a meeting. And when we went, we didn't realize, but at Mattel, they're very casual. We went there in full suit and ties. We were carrying briefcases, we really did look like Jersey Mafia. And we were walking through the parking lot, and noticing there's guys standing out in these, just regular, everyday, chilled out clothes, and they're looking at us walking through the parking lot. We walked in there, and as ridiculous as we looked, I guess we made an impression. We brought up prototypes and stuff, and we had a meeting with them, and a lot of people were coming through, seeing the stuff, and they just asked what we kind of had in mind, and we said, well, it's always been our dream to revamp and relaunch He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And they said, you know what? We were thinking the exact same thing. We were actually thinking about maybe hiring an outside team to do it. So it was just kismet. It was just the right place, the right time, the right people working together, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was an experience that we'll never forget. That was our foot in the door to the major portions of the toy industry. McFarlane Toys was big, but this was Mattel, the largest toy company on the planet. So
I remember,
no comparison.
I remember the first time I worked with you, I did the entire Harry Potter line for many years, right?
Yep.
And remember, before the movie hit, they had the animated stuff, which was but the style guide was kind of whack.
Right.
But you guys did as good as you could. You did the Hagrid.
Yeah.
You did the big collectibles, and you did a great job, right? And it was awesome. But just to that point of the relaunch, you guys want to talk about a little bit, because I think I was still on Mattel Sports at that time, managing that line, and I remember the relaunch, and if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, I remember you guys did an initial sculpt, and it was more traditional, right, of He-Man and Skeletor. I remember seeing the sculpts, and they looked awesome. And then I'm not sure what happened, and maybe you can refresh my memory, that all of a sudden there was something, well, instead of doing this classic sculpt like we're doing now, the last classic relaunch, let's try this anime thing. Remember anime was big?
Dragon Ball Z.
Yes, Dragon Ball Z. Everything had to be Dragon Ball Z. And I was like, whoa, Dragon Ball Z for He-Man? I'm not sure. But again, I wasn't on the line, so I was just looking, on the outside in. And I just remember I never really liked that sculpt that had He-Man like this with his neck coming out of his chest. What is that, right? But they went into child research.
That's right.
They went into market research.
That's what it was all about.
And the kids said, we want the anime look. And we based they based the entire relaunch on that anime look.
Yeah, and especially the hair. It's the spiky mullet hair.
Oh, the hair,
French
all that I wasn't a fan.
And they cut all the articulation out of
I
the
wasn't
legs
a
and
fan.
stuff.
I wasn't a
Yeah,
fan,
mean,
all right?
Obviously, we always got like, I guess, the filtered or the distilled information on what went on because we weren't part of that portion of the stuff.
Right.
I mean, now we've dealt with the marketing people who went, had
Marketing.
testing.
Marketing.
But to say the least, we weren't pleased when we found out what they had planned for what was gonna go on.
It was too much tinkering.
Yeah,
Of course, and that's the problem, and I don't wanna. I don't want to start saying about what's wrong with the company, because it was good to me for quite some time, but, yeah, I mean, I love the first ones you guys did, I was like, wow, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
we came in
And
with a
then-
really traditional,
It was
classic
awesome.
sculpture in the
It was
anatomy.
beautiful.
And it had a lot of articulation, and it was kind of a new, different take on He-Man, but
Beautiful.
you know, it was a step forward as far as anatomical sculpture
Like the
and action
statue of
figures.
David.
But,
With furry
Well, that
shorts.
They were
And long
awesome.
braided hair.
the thing is too, I mean, you have to also realize that at that time, they were trying to do something really, really big. So they really, I mean, they were, you know, this stuff was gonna sell on Toys R Us, and it was gonna be a huge relaunch. You know, when you step back and look at it 15, you know, 14 years later, you'd say, sure, I mean, they tried to do everything that they had in their power to make it into something big, you know, I mean, so, you know, I can't really just look at them like, gee, you know, let's just, whatever's popular do.
So I guess I'm like the only person on this panel that actually loves that line. Because
Oh, I understand. I didn't say, it was He-Man was the biggest, like, uh-oh. Because what happened was when we went to Comic-Con that year and showed the statue, we got a lot of negative response. Or actually, it was before we actually went to Comic-Con, they showed it online. A lot of negative response. And it was crazy how negative the response is. And we had never experienced anything like that. We had never experienced this vitriol against us changing this legend. But as the days went on, more people came around saying how they actually liked the idea of it, and they're open to the idea of it. And then when Comic-Con came around and they showed all the other figures that were in the line, and people kind of saw the overall direction of everything, and He-Man was the one that they really took the leap forward, sideways, backward, whatever, the leap with, then they understood, and like then the response was fairly positive on everything. So
And he
it turned
really-
out to be a really positive experience.
And he was the most drastic.
Yeah,
I mean, especially
absolutely.
just as the line went on and that oversight with the whole anime thing, it just wasn't as much of a factor coming from Mattel anymore. And you could kind of see as the line goes on, they start going back into that more classical style a little bit and more directly based off of the original designs. And you could see as that was happening, it seemed to us at least, that the fan base was, you know, embracing it more and more. And of course, the problem was as everybody was embracing it more and more, Smash Blade, He-Man, and Skeletor were on the shelves instead of Tila and Evelyn and the Snake Man.
There was
Fans didn't want to embrace the same figure over and
There was
over.
stuff they started doing, as I looked on the outside end, like, you're gonna put He-Man on a pit bull? Really? Spitbull.
Spitball.
He-Man on a dog? When I saw that, I said, what are you guys doing?
Go back to one thing that Morgan said that I think is actually a really, just from our standpoint, just made such a huge difference. When we first went in and pitched ourselves to Mattel, we were actually going in and pitching like we wanted to come in as employees of Mattel and actually work for the company. And the gentleman that worked there, it was the head of Boyd's Design at the time, John Handy.
John Handy.
Which he was very much responsible for bringing us in and setting us up with Mattel. Gave us the best piece of advice that could have ever been given. He said, no. He said, keep yourselves as a separate entity. You're kind of like a little satellite part of Mattel, but you're not involved. And over the years, the wisdom of that advice has played out just time after time again, because we sit over in our studio and just pump out work and are insulated from a lot of the, you know, those meetings and testings and all that stuff. And while that stuff has just been going on, we can just continue to move the lines forward. And a lot of things have happened that wouldn't have happened otherwise if we would have been part of the actual company. Classics probably wouldn't have happened.
Absolutely.
Because we were able to do it on our own time, bring it in, pitch it. It probably would have gone through meeting after meeting after meeting if we were in Mattel. So it's, you know, that one piece of advice all these years later, I mean, you just really
Absolutely.
It was advantageous to both us and Mattel, because not only did it allow us the freedom of being able to do this work and not have to get into all the red tape and go through all the meetings and approvals and all that kind of stuff, but Mattel can come to us sometimes and say, hey, we want you guys to do this for us, and then we're gonna pitch it to our marketing people. So the design guys would have us doing work for them that if they were doing it there at Mattel, it would probably have to go through a bunch of levels of approval before they did it. They just send it to us and say, hey, can you guys do this? And we're gonna pitch it.
That's exactly
Can
why
you
I
make
started.
those changes?
That's exactly why I started off the thing, Dan, like showing or telling about how we used to be, you know, saddled with the internal groups. Then once you guys came in, that was a whole shift, dude. That was a whole big shift, and that's what you guys are talking about now.
Yeah.
And that made a big, big difference in how the vendor-client relationship, you know, became. And you guys were off on your own, doing your magic, which you guys continue to do. These guys are awesome. And they continue Are you guys still non-digital? Are you guys still old school?
We're actually moving into digital.
We do both.
Do a little bit of both now?
Yeah.
Because I know at one time you guys were just clay, bro.
It's, I mean, it's inevitable. It's going digital.
Is
There's
it?
no, yeah. There is
You have to succumb?
And
You're going to the dark side?
You know what? I gotta say, because I mean, I've been probably one of the staunchest resistors of digital. Like I love it. I still love traditional, but the thing is with digital, and I never thought I would hear myself saying
What do
this.
you use?
ZBrush.
Oh, everybody uses ZBrush.
Yeah.
Gentle Giant's a big ZBrush guy.
Yeah, it's kind of become
I just
industry
try to learn,
standard.
but I'm too stupid.
I mean,
I can
it
even
is.
pick it up, and if
Really?
I can do it, anybody.
It's a huge learning curve because it's not intuitive at all.
It's not.
I don't think.
I heard that it was I heard it was like a digital Photoshop. I mean, I learned Photoshop. Dummy me. I mean, when I started Mattel, it was markers and pencil.
The thing is,
That
once you
was
get
it.
over the hump, like
Really? Then you're stuck in the fly?
then you start realizing, because you know, it's like in ZBrush, your sculpture is called a tool, and your tools are called brushes.
Right.
Like for someone who's been sculpting for years and years, even just something as simple as that doesn't make a lot of sense. And then you start realizing there's things called subdivisions, where a subdivision is basically kind of the same thing as a rough clay and a final clay, but you can jump back and forth, which is amazing. Once you
click the
figure it
wrong
out.
thing.
It's like you save often, and you can always go back. So
I always forget my password.
But the thing about about ZBrush though, is that I didn't expect out of it, because I thought you're going to lose creativity.
Right.
But instead, for me, I find that it's actually a faster way to get ideas into a dimensional reality quicker. And I mean, the thing is, we a lot of times do a hybrid where we'll start digitally, output, and then convert it over to castellane or wax, and then
You can do that?
finish traditionally. Yeah. So we do a lot.
So you
of
can start digital and then code. You can output a castellane and then
No, you output it as like a regular digital output, and then we do the molding and casting and pour it in castellane clay, and then you can sculpt into that castellane clay. Finish it that way, or you can go back and scan that castellane into the digital again and finish it that way.
Magicians.
Which is kind of what happened with the troll. When Eric was working on the troll for our Mythic Legions line, they kind of went through clay, digital clay, and went through a few different iterations before we got the final product.
Yeah, because that line we started, it was gonna be a 4-inch line, and we switched it to a 6-inch line, so the troll was originally this big. We switched the scale of the line before it came out, So rather than completely scrapping that sculpture, scanned it in, finished it in ZBrush, and now it's that big.
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking, and it happened to me, like when I started Mattel in '82, was markers and pencils, and a black and white Xerox machine. And you cut and paste the markers and you mess up the background. And there was no Photoshop when I started at Mattel.
Yeah.
And then little by little, I figured, you know, if I don't learn Photoshop, I'm gonna be a dinosaur. So I took a class and actually, Photoshop is pretty intuitive. I hated Illustrator, I still don't use Illustrator. But I'm retired now, so it doesn't matter, I almost does that a lot. But I know that there are these guys at Mattel that I've seen them just, they don't even start with pencil. I like to start with pencil, right? Back when I was working, if I was doing a figure, just like that, I like just the tactile feel of a pencil on paper. Then I'd scan it, then I'd do Photoshop. But I know some guys that I saw them drawing on it, bro, and they just sketch in like a 50% gray. You do, you know, Captain America, then all of a sudden, boom, they get it. Then they do a gradient tool, and I'm like, wow, and they're fast. So you got them going that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we're kind of exactly where you were with the Photoshop. It's to a point where we really don't have a choice.
A lot of companies are actually going completely, like, you can't do work for Hasbro if
Right.
you
I was just
don't
gonna-
do digital.
I was just gonna say
And
that.
other companies,
Send
all
a
the other
file.
companies are starting to go the same way.
And that's the thing with Mattel, like on the DC stuff in particular, we've been doing a lot of digital, and for workflow, one of the huge advantages, aside from the fact that the sculpting can be faster or resizing is faster,
Right.
if we can now take a file and send it directly over to Mattel, they send it directly to China, you pick up 2 weeks of time.
Absolutely.
Which, it's all about schedule, especially like if we're doing, something for a movie launch or something like that, where, you're probably gonna lose 2 weeks waiting for reference at some point, so you can pick it up on the back end.
And just to that point, now that you bring up China, and again, I saw people ask me a lot when, what was the biggest thing I saw in my tenure at Mattel, and I always say it's the digital age. And the last line I was working on was Max Steel, and I just remember sending a B sheet, about 3/4 view, right, of my drawing, Photoshop, and I sent it up to China, and in a week, I'd get turns, all digital sculpts. I mean, they are getting, I hate to bring off the word offshore, but those guys are getting better and better and better. Not at everything.
Right.
There's some things that they have a disconnect, right? And that you can send them stuff and they just won't get it. They can't get it. And they'll never get it because there's that cultural difference, in my opinion. But they've gotten so good and so fast. And we're not even talking Hong Kong, we're talking mainland China. I would send them a B sheet, and in a week, I'd get turns of digital sculpts. Wow.
Well, a lot of people the reason they say they're scared of digital is because, it loses something, it loses personality, and you know what? I've seen that a lot of times when things look dead and they just look lifeless.
Soulless, no soul.
Eric just finished a sculpture, I can't really say, it was for DC, but when he forwarded the digital sculpture from his computer over to our computer so I could send it to Mattel, I noticed it looks just like one of Eric Treadaway's sculptures. His personality and the style that he has is in that sculpture. He doesn't look dead or lifeless at all. If the sculptor is talented enough, it seems like they can intuitively pick up that ZBrush and work into that computer sculpting exactly the same style and gestures and everything that they had in their regular sculpting.
It sounds extremely cliche, and I've heard it so many times, but it's, I'm very fresh into this right now, so I'm still, kind of feeling this, it really is just another tool in the toolbox, because, it's still the sculptor's brain that's making things happen here, and so, if you sculpt drapery a certain way, or you tend to like to exaggerate certain facial features or do anatomy a certain way, you're going to do it with a hand tool. You're going to do it with a digital tool the same way. There's certain tricks that you've got in clay, and certain tricks that you can pick up in digital. And
You know what I think it's one of the determining factors. I know a number of really good traditional sculptors that switched not so gracefully into digital, not because they're lacking any talent, but just because you're so tempted to just start coasting because it's so much easier. And the thing is that I think that a great number of people who are actually switching to digital, be it Photoshop or be it ZBrush, be it graphic design or sculpting, is just so much more convenient. You know, you click a button and you flip the image, and then you just don't apply yourself as much as you were in either clay or markers or pencil, whatever the case might be.
So then that's a bad sculptor. He needs to apply himself to what he should normally.
It comes down to, as far as like speed, it's one thing like you're talking about getting the product to the client in time, but if you're gonna do scale detail or put buckles and velvets and all kinds of stuff, I mean, if you're the guy who's doing that sort of work, and that's the kind of thing that you like to do and you do it, you can do that stuff so much quicker. Instead of spending 3 days on a torso and body of scales and stuff like that, you can lay that stuff out in a couple hours.
Could you imagine like the Aquaman figure or that Copperhead figure with the scales from head to toe? That was all done with a little tool present. Can you imagine how much easier and quicker that would have, all that detail would have gone digitally? Just done.
One of the biggest
And it would have wrapped around all the forms perfectly and everything.
One of the biggest things that's changed in the last probably 8 years is the quality of the printers. Like
Sure,
old printers,
yeah,
old
I remember
printers,
that. It's the other
everybody
wrappers.
would get this stuff back.
You have to sand it.
It looked good on screen, and by the time they cleaned it up,
Right.
it was like, you know,
cares?
it's not that great. And then
Right.
another generation would be taken from that tooling, and then by the time the finished product was done, it didn't look really that great. Now, the printers are so good that people don't, you barely have to clean them, and they're super clean, so.
The
that's a
digital
huge
printer
thing.
that we use, when it comes in, it's finished, other than there's these tiny little support rods that hold it up while it's being printed.
Billboards.
And we just take a little piece of sandpaper, just knock those off, and it's done, and it's immaculate. It's beautiful.
The thing that I think is different.
And cheap.
I mean, yeah, and cheap, I like that, but I don't know if you guys have a difference, but I don't know if, for me, I just do analog now. I haven't touched Photoshop other than crop my paint and send it like webmaster, but for me, there's nothing like a brush to paper, whether it's gouache or whether it's pastel on canson, or whether it's oil and you know, on a canvas. There's that tactile feeling, right?
Yep.
And the smell, and you know, smell the turf or whatever, that just and it brings it's visceral, it brings you back into what you're doing.
Yep.
When you're in a computer, your eyes hurt. You know, I just, you know,
I know there's times when I'm sitting there
there's a difference.
fabricating stuff on my back and my shoulder's screwed up now because I'm sitting here for years doing this kind of stuff. You know, you get those pains, they're just in different areas.
You guys
But
feel a
I
difference
completely agree that, you know, getting your hands into the clay, getting into the fabrication, getting into the paints or the pencils. and stuff,
Armature.
It's just, it's a completely different experience than sculpting digitally, but.
It is what it is.
That's what I mean. I like them both. Because I think, like, what I mean, for me, what's fun about this stuff is it's not just the actual sculpting, it's just the process of bringing an idea or a concept into reality. And so the digital is a very fast way to do that. It's almost like because the most fun part a lot of times with the sculpture is the roughing out process.
Yeah.
And so the roughing out process, like, I mean, that first day of sculpting with a digital sculpture, you can just go to town on it. But I do still, I love to be able to, even if I completely almost finish a piece digitally, I'd love to be able to take it eventually into Castellini and get that last kind of pass over with the tools and actually, you know, really play with those joints and make sure you're getting full clearance. And as good as those printers are, and you see, this is what I think, you know, we're talking about like a dead looking digital sculpture. No matter how tight that print is, like, if if you could take that thing into a wax or a clay and give it one final pass,
Yes,
you're
because-
gonna get
yes,
something
You're
there.
talking about a disconnect.
Yes,
You don't have that connection of what you're building.
Yep.
You feel it and touch it.
yeah, and you know, you look at,
That's the thing about sculpting, bro.
yeah.
I can tell you, even a very specific moment. This is obviously not advocating anything against digital sculpting, because it's obviously having so many perks that are just absolutely priceless. But the thing is, if I'm working on the computer and just looking at something that's virtual reality 3D, and you're looking at it and it's supposed to be 3D when we in fact know that it isn't. Even just the feeling that either I have, or if I'm too close to the situation, my daughter walks in, looks at the screen, she gets one sort of a reaction out of it, as opposed to me just tinkering with, you know, a hand or a leg, and everything is in pieces, and then that one moment when I actually assemble everything on the table, and then there is that one moment when you go like, wow, okay, this is a being now, this is not a concept, this is not a expression, but this is a physical being. So I, like I said, you know, try to disconnect myself from overthinking too much about it, and then I just observe people, how they react to it. And even somebody as small as 3 years old has a very, very different reaction to it. So she comes in and she's like, she beams up, and not in the same way how she's looking at stuff on the computer.
Yeah.
And you know, all of that stuff might be just as important or potent in so many different ways, and just as inspired.
Well, I mean, we're making toys here, so it's not a toy, you got it in your hand.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, because it's not a real thing to me until you've at least printed it out and you can touch it. Like, it can look as cool as it can look on the screen, but, you know, I'm a toy guy. Like, I want to be able to have this thing in my hand and tinker with it. And
It almost becomes from like a science or an engineering thing to an art thing.
Yes.
And there's, to me as an artist, I feel that there's a difference. There's something there that I can see, that touch, you know. I did a little bit of model making, I'm not sculpting like you guys, but I did some sculpts in my day. And it's just a different thing, man, so.
Yep.
I don't know, do you wanna open up the questions?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. We got about 10 to 15 minutes left, so if anybody No, I was gonna let these guys just go. Why would I stop that? Why would I stop that? No, that's totally great. Look, I came in and I said, hey, what do you guys want to do? They said, let's just do a Q&A. And then so I wasn't gonna stop that.
You can blame me.
hey, you know what, though, we're gonna be at the booth all weekend, so
Absolutely,
if
yeah.
you got questions, Q&A can continue.
We may not
past
have
that.
answers, but we'll spit something.
Well, if any of you guys have questions, we've got a microphone right here up in the center. Feel free to come line up at the microphone and we'll fire off some questions here.
Oh, we cut you off.
Shut off.
It's closer, it's okay.
Is that, there you go.
Hello, I'm David Clark, known as Adult Collector Online. First, thank you so much for putting my name on all your toys. I really appreciate it.
That's okay.
Could you talk a little bit about not necessarily the evolution, but could you talk about the involvement of the collector community in the design process, both in the making of it, in the plan, you know, the pre-planning, and once the figure is made, and in the overall look of the line itself, over time, how that's evolved, since we were all, you know, kids just pointing at the toy at the toy store with our moms saying, please, please, please buy this, and then we would play with it, and that was it. And now it's you know, we're adults and we're online nagging you guys constantly about what we want. You know, Cornboy, can you please have this? Can you please have that?
Well, you know what, I mean, just briefly, Maddie Collector and that whole, getting a figure once a month being sent to you, I don't think that even would have happened if it hadn't been for this little kid that came up and said, oh, you can't get them every month, and how do we do it? And we just kind of looked at each other when we were on the panel. It was at a San Diego Comic-Con panel, we're like, well, could we do some kind of subscription thing? We're like, maybe, let's try it. And it happened. But I mean, back even when we were at McFarlane Toys, I mean, obviously, McFarlane Toys was a very fan-oriented company, and they listened to fans. And I think when Jim, Eric, and I were working there, we kind of picked that up from that company. And early on, Eric and I, McFarlane Toys even sent us out to a couple Comic-Cons to talk to fans and to work at the booth, and some more to work at the booth than talk to fans. But so from the beginning in the toys industry, we kind of had a sense that fans are very important to what we do. If it wasn't for action figure collectors, fans of our work, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing. So throughout the years, we just tried to at least put an ear out there and listen to what fans are saying. We make our own decisions, you know, we decide what we want to do, but even with this latest Mythic Legions lines we've done, as fans have spoken up about some of the images we've shown, we went back and made changes. Orange Steelhide, the green dwarf in the Mythic Legions line, he had just a metal head, and people were like, I'm not sure that I like that so much. Guess what? He's got a second head now with a beard. The one of the skeletons, was it Tibius? Had the one head with the, it was just a basic head, and people were saying, well, he's kind of like this skeleton, just slightly different. So we said, you know what, second head, and let's put paints on it. So I mean, it's just little minor changes, but it's obvious that we value fan opinion, and I think, like I said, it started back when we were working with McFarlane Toys, and we can't take every comment that every fan says to heart and make changes. Otherwise, that's all we get done is run around making changes and making stuff for fans. You know, we have to kind of be like a business and run things like a business, but we're always open to fan comments and suggestions.
I think specifically, like from a master standpoint, I think classics was very much the kind of the idea and that we brought in pitch was very much born from watching, because like I mean we didn't really get on the internet and stuff while we were at McFarlane so much. Like it was still kind of a new thing. And then once 2002 happened, like message boards and fan feedback and Comic-Con appearances and things like that started to kick in, and yeah, I was when we really started like gathering a feel for what fans wanted to see and they reacted to. And so the fact that we went through 2002 really brought us to classics, and there was fan interaction for that from the beginning, because Dave Voss said, let's go throw the prototype in the case at Comic-Con. There was like 40 pages on heman.org about you know, the belly button's too high. You know, the eyes are too small. You know, if I sat here and think about it, I could probably remember every one, because we did go back and changed every single one of those things. So all the way back to that first figure, and Classics it has been so great for that, because you know, all the way back, like on King Hits, you know, that I always bring this up because this is one of the ones like I feel like you know, like I just dropped the ball on. Like
He still loses sleep at night over King Hits.
You know, like I thought, well, you know, we'll make it look like the classic toy. It's an update of the classic toy. Came out, obviously, people want it. But then, you know, other issues aside that we won't get into here, the corrected version did eventually come out. And so it's, you know, it just factors in heavily. I mean, because these are lines that are not for the mass market, they're for you guys. And so, you know, we're always trying to anticipate what everybody's going to want. Sometimes we don't get it right, but you know, luckily we get a chance to go back and fix it, or at least on the next one, may, you know, approach it a little bit different.
Just a little background on King Hiss, because you brought it up, and I always remember about it, that King Hiss, that one, Snakeface was, Pat worked on that, Pat's right here, a good friend of mine, he worked on the classic line for many years. He did Snakeface, but King Hiss, at one time, he was supposed to do something, but I remember engineering said we can't do it. So we had the original King Hiss, didn't he come apart?
Yeah.
Because the reason he had to come apart was because what Prelim had pitched to marketing was this awesome thing that was gonna happen. But it really couldn't happen mechanically, right? And it couldn't happen physically due to money. So we didn't know what we were gonna do. We were ready to drop King Hiss because we couldn't make it happen. I don't know if we're supposed to squeeze out stuff I think we're supposed to squeeze out slime or something, but either safety got involved or somebody got involved, and then all of a sudden King Hiss was not gonna happen anymore. So what we ended up doing is putting 2 shells, right? Wasn't it 2 shells,
Yeah.
clamshells?
Yes.
Right? And then once you took apart the clamshells, there was these snakes underneath it, and that was it, like, what? No. That's my King Hiss story.
But didn't everybody not love that toy as a kid?
Yeah,
Awesome figure.
I was disappointed.
All right, let's go next question.
So Corn Boy, earlier you mentioned you saw a lot of negative reaction when the 2002 He-Man was released. I remember
When it was revealed.
revealed online. I remember looking at it on my computer thinking, wow, okay.
Going WTF?
Well, no, I was scratching my head, and I remember one of the most controversial pieces was the actual sword redesign. And I thought about it, and I'm like, well, what? And I remember scratching my head again. And then as I started hearing the rumors as to why it was designed the way it was, I thought it was a bit fascinating. And so I was hoping you could share that story with us today. And also, Martin, if you knew of had any thoughts or knew what Tony was doing when he designed the original or sculpted the original He-Man, if there's any thoughts that went into the original sword design.
Well, at Four Horsemen Studios, whenever we come up with like action figures and action figure designs, we don't just we try not to just make cool action figures. We try to come up with backstories and everything for them. And with that, the 2000X He-Man and the Masters of the Universe line, our kind of idea with that was that this was years after the original He-Man and the Masters of the Universe series. And at this point, somehow, you didn't know how, this would be a story that would be told later on, Skeletor had come back and gotten both parts of the power sword, and he now was wielding the power sword, and he had control over Castle Grayskull, and He-Man and Duncan and a lot of the other masters were now fugitives. And both Sorceress and Man-at-Arms had gotten together and built this new power sword for He-Man, imbued it with the magic of Grayskull, what little magic the Sorceress had left in her to do it, and created this new power sword. And they were using that to go back after Skeletor to regain the control of Castle Grayskull and the original power sword. And so that's why Skeletor's sword was redesigned too, and it was 2 separate halves. Like the original toy power swords were 2 separate halves. It was 2 separate halves, and one had kind of a good side and one had an evil side. We actually made a prototype when we did that sword, and Jim fabricated this thing. I made the big sword, and it was a 2-up sword, so it was this big. Jim took it and cast it in clear, and took these little diodes and batteries and hooked all in it, and when you put it together, that blade, both those blades lit up on the Skeletor sword. Yeah. Couldn't happen when we costed it out. Plus, it was going to be half that size. Yeah, because that's basically that's the reason for that power sword. It was like a storyline behind it. Through research, Mattel decided that they didn't really care for that story that much, but they liked the sword, and kids liked the sword, so they decided to keep the sword the way it was. And it's just kind of stuck.
Thank you.
Or didn't, depending on who you
Yeah.
ask.
Right.
It had that mechanical feature, remember it flipped open? Because at the time, Mattel, I remember when we went there, and they really loved this stuff, like they had those cars, they would hit the front of it, and it flipped over,
Crash and bash.
and it showed the thing, so they were like, anything you can add, something that transforms or switches or something like that, so that's when we put that little.
It's called the TV moment in a TV commercial for a TV driver. All about marketing, guys.
Thank you for getting that on record, because it's still kind of circulating on the web as to why was the sword designed the way it
I've
was.
actually told that story on panels before. I'm surprised that it's still circulating as a rumor.
I still see it pop
I have it
up.
on camera over here.
Yeah, here.
That was the original idea with it.
Thank you.
A brief synopsis. We had it much more laid out than that, but that's just a brief synopsis.
We only have about 5 more minutes, so I'm sorry to cut you guys short, but let's try to get to these last 3 questions here if we can.
Hello, my name is Luis Villagomez from Mexico. My English is not that good, but I'm gonna try to do my best. This
Go
question is
slow,
for
'cause we're kind of stupid.
this question is for Mr. Martin. No offense, please. I'm a prototype collector, and I remember seeing a catalog from Mattel, and I think it's the 1987, and there's a blade picture, and it's like a conceptual sculpt, and there's a production one. Why you put like that different picture? You know what I mean?
What was the name of the figure?
Blade.
Blade.
Yeah.
Yeah, Blade is,
It's yours, right?
Blade,
Just
no, Blade got produced.
Yeah. But there's a picture of like an unproduced one, like conceptual one.
Had a different head. There were
Yeah,
two
different head.
sculpts. So one
Oh, really?
sculpt was basically based on a concept before the movie was completed, and the second one was more resembling.
Yeah, again, I was with movies, it's hard. I remember when I was doing Harry Potter, you never get the reference when you need it, ever. I remember when I was doing Harry Potter, I was begging for reference. I'm supposed to be sculpting the thing, I gotta get it in production. We got awesome photos that got printed on Vanity Fair before I got them as a designer. It was on Vanity Fair, a 6-page spread, like, what? It's on Vanity Fair and I don't have them, so a lot of the times you have to do stuff on your own. When I designed Other Twice for a book with Robin Williams, we never got what Robin Williams, what was the girl? Tinkerbell. You never knew her costume. I had to make it up. A bunch of leaves, like what? Tinkerbell, okay. What's her name when she first started? Yes, Julia Roberts. And so a lot of times you don't get the references by the time you need it. That's all I can say. You have to make it up.
So it was probably an early prototype before they got the actor's reference.
Yeah, the weird thing for me is in the same page, there's the production one and the unproduced one in the same picture.
Yeah,
the
this is
same
an
page.
actor. He was here last time.
Yeah.
It's the Blade guy. Anthony's, the whip guy.
Yep. And can I know what other figures did you sculpt?
I'm sorry?
Can I know what other?
What figures did you
Yeah.
sculpt, or did you work on?
I worked on the line for 5-6 years. I didn't sculpt any myself. It was all sculpted inside, but I designed and developed them.
Oh, okay, got it.
So I was the designer and manager that did, from what? The first one I did was the drum rotating He-Man. I don't know what year that was.
Battle armor?
That was the first one. It was drum rotating He-Man and drum rotating Skeletor, or battle armor. Yeah, those were the first ones I did. And then I did it till the end, until marketing overshipped it. Then I did the New Adventures, right? Was that the next one?
Yep.
Then the New Adventures. Then went off to do something else, and came back to do the classics with these guys. But they're one-stop shop. I did nothing. I just said, yes, great.
Thank you very much.
And this gentleman down here worked on the ski tour, so he's my personal favorite. All right, last 2 questions. Yep, let's go ahead and get him fired out here.
G'day guys. I was just curious if you could tell me a little bit about the relationship between you guys as the sculptors and what we hear about engineering. So when something like, the sorceress's wings don't come out quite the way you expected or something, what the sort of back and forth is between you guys as sculptors and them as...
First of all, I'm gonna let somebody else answer this question.
Thank you.
But stop criticizing America about guns or I'm gonna shoot you. I see it on Facebook all the time, it's enough. That's enough. I love my guns.
I can take that question on sorcerer because I started on the line, and that was one of the ones I worked on, and it was a tough one. Sorcerers was tough because engineering can only do stuff that's mechanically, producible, right? And being able to be manufactured. And normally when you have a mechanism like that, I remember did you pull on her tail or move her tail, and then the wings would deploy. But there has to be gears and stuff. There has to be a spring. It's a spring-loaded mechanism, right? And when we used to do that back in the day, whether it's web store or whatever, you had to put a backpack on. But a backpack on a doll with wings made absolutely no sense. So, but we had to house the mechanism. So I went back and forth with engineering on that. And engineering are very linear. They're linear people, you know that. And I, as a designer, it's gotta look good. She got this big hump on her back. What? She can't have that. But in the end, if we wanted that mechanism to be like that, if you wanted to be able to do, mechanically, pull it, you had to have those gears. If not, you had to have it pull out manually, and then the magic was gone. So
yeah, it's a tough
you have to go
balance
back and
between
forth. It is
between
good.
visual aesthetics and action features. You gotta,
Yes.
it's hard to find the right balance sometimes.
It's tough.
And safety.
Safety.
Because that's one thing,
Safety, yes.
although it's an adult collector line for Mattel, their safety standards follow through. Just because it's adult collector line doesn't matter. There's the same standards as if this was a mass market line for kids. And so sometimes that plays in. I mean, I do have to say though that on classics, although there's some things like that do stand out, I would say based off of lines that we worked on, the track record of how engineering has worked with us on it and been able to bring it to production is one of the best experiences that we've had. There's been times, I mean, the line's been going on for a long time, and sometimes there's been a little bit more of a disconnect with the engineers, and there's been other periods where the interaction is very close and very a daily experience. But like I said, I mean, overall, the engineering has really been able to maintain what we've done on this line.
Yeah, but the good thing about
Really
classics, you didn't have any action figure. It was just detail, bitch and sculpting, and nice paintings. There is no action features in the classic, correct? It was just
Pretty much,
90%,
90%, yeah.
Or like take a master
90% of
off, or whatever.
All right, let's go ahead and get this last question out here so we can clear out for the next panel.
How you doing? Chris Epps, Augusta, Georgia. I know it's like asking which kid is your favorite, but which has been your favorite figure out of all the lines you've worked on as part you put the most pride and energy in, which turned out the
Ever
best
or
one?
Masters?
No, ever. It doesn't have to be just Masters.
For me, I've always, since I was a kid, not just like making figures or being in the toy industry, but since I was a kid, the guys who were more square shaped, like the Thing is my favorite character of all time. So I like big, beefy, bulky guys. So that troll that we just did, the prototype for, is my favorite that we've done ever. Eric sculpted a Thing figure for me for Christmas one time that we'll never see production, maybe. But that's my actual favorite figure that I own. But for stuff that we worked on as a company, I think the Troll is my favorite. I'm sorry it's not Masters. I mean, if I have to go to Masters, then it's probably Whiplash or Beastman, the big beefy guys. Waffle. Me? No, George is not that big. Oh,
I can't name one, I'll just name a few off the top of my head because it's too difficult to pick just one. Rayman, Fisto, Marcus Phoenix from Gears of War, Batman Begins, Christian Bale, 20-inch Batman, and Kratos, God of War 3. Those are.
Those are all.
You're worse than me. I thought I was bad at making the decision.
Just couldn't.
I mean, I'm the same as him. Like, I mean, we've done thousands of figures at this point, and I mean, got a certain amount of love for every one. I would say, it's like a very highlight figure for me is Merman from Classics, just because it was one of the most, like, direct, like, connections to childhood and just kind of, you know, being a 9-year-old boy and fantasizing about making toys. Like, it's, I don't know, like it was just like a very special experience for me. Like, it was almost like this little like time travel, like back to that time. So that was a great one.
Merman made it for you, huh?
Yeah, well, because we finally got to make it look like the card back. So that was, I wanted that thing so bad as a kid in the toy.
Hey man, I wanted it too, but sculpting wasn't given to me.
I'm gonna push you guys along here because we need to clear out for the next panel.
I'll give my stock answer that I give every time. The last figure that we ship out the door.
It's called a paycheck.
Awesome. We good? All right, guys. Well, let's have a round of applause for the full group. Thank you guys for coming.